Okay, now let's start looking at some of the orders that have changed a little bit over time. They're a lot less primitive, shall we say. They've had evolution and natural selection act on them over the millennia, and we start seeing some interesting changes. The first order we're going to look at are the Ephemeroptera. So the Ephemeroptera are commonly known as the mayflies. So if you have lived anywhere where mayflies emerge en masse, you know of these insects. So let's break down their order name first and foremost. Ephemera, this comes from the word ephemeral. So the root of this order is ephemerer, and it means short-lived. So ephemeral means short, right? While Ptera or ptera means wings. Now, ptera has a couple of forms or conjugations, if you will. And so if you put an O in front of this Ptera, this indicates that wings are present. So we have Ephemeroptera. This literally means short-lived winged insect. Now, if you put an A in front of this Ptera, it means wings are not present. So aptera, no wings, optera, winged. So short-lived winged insect is what we are dealing with here. Okay, so individuals of this order may have one or two pairs of wings. So they'll be on that meso and that metathoracic region. The forewings are very large and kind of triangular in shape. So you can see that here, you can see that here, while the hind wings may be very tiny, so just this little bit right here, or like on this one, completely absent. Just depends on the species, depends on the group. Now the adults, when they emerge, they're about 20 millimeters in length, so they're a good size, and they have completely reduced mouth parts. So what this means is that the adults don't have any ability to feed. So they don't have mandibulate mouth parts or hypognathus or anything of that nature. Instead, it's just these very, very tiny remnants of what the mouth parts used to be. So they do not feed. So this is what gives them that short-lived name. Instead, the adults emerge and fly around with the express purpose of finding a mate. So basically, they're just flying gonads. All they do is mate, lay eggs, and die. That's their entire adult lifetime. There's so many jokes I can make about this, but I won't. Now, they live for just a few days at most, and they will mate in these huge swarms, laying eggs and eventually dying. So to facilitate this flying and mating lifestyle, the adults have very large compound eyes. So you can see those here, and they have these long filiform antennae. The males also have elongate forelegs. Look at that. So if you look at those first pair of legs on that prothoracic region, they're very, very long. What these are used for is during mating, the males will reach out and grab the females. So the males will fly around in these really large groups looking for females. When a female is ready to mate, she will come by these really large groups of males, and then a male will reach out and grab her with these super developed forelegs, and they will mate on the wing. So they'll go and fly and mate at the same time. Now, this group exhibits hemimetabolous metamorphosis. Remember what that means. So hemi means half, and so they have a change that is sort of half and half. And hemimetabolous, for the purposes of this class, is specifically those organisms that the young live underwater. We therefore call them naiads. Okay, so they've got an aquatic stage, and then the adults are terrestrial. Because they live in freshwater habitats with very high oxygen content, the young have gills that allow them to get oxygen from water. Now, the naiads don't live up to this Ephemeroptera type of name. They are very long-lived, in fact. They will go somewhere between 12 and 45 instars, depending on the species, and they have these robust chewing mouth parts in this naiad stage. Some species spend their whole naiad time grazing on algae and aquatic fungi. They're basically vegetarian. There are other species, though, that are predatory. Again, it just depends on the species. So the job of this naiad stage is to gather as many calories as physically possible. This will give the adults the caloric energy they need in order to make it through that short adult stage. So since they don't feed as adults, they have to get all of their energy. They have to store everything up during these 12 to 45 instars in the naiads. And then they use that stored energy to molt into that adult stage, to fly around, to mate, to lay their eggs. When the naiads are ready to turn into adults, though, they have to do so in stages. So first, they emerge into what are called subimagos. So the term imago refers to the adult stage. So a subimago is a stage right before the adult stage. Now, this stage takes some time to find its footing, and then it molts into the adult stage. So basically, the naiads will crawl out of the water. They will molt, leaving that exuvia in the environment, and then they will have this sort of winged format that isn't quite adult, isn't quite sexually mature yet. They'll molt one more time, be fully adults, and then move along. Now, what's neat about these mayflies, or annoying if you have to live with them, is that they will emerge into the subimagos and adults at the same time in these very, very large numbers. So the resulting swarms are so incredibly huge that they can be seen actually on Doppler radar. They can be seen from space. That's nuts. The areas near the swarms will just get covered in mayfly bodies. The roads will become slick with mayfly hemolymph. The bodies of the flies will drift into mounds along bridges and roadsides, and they swarm around lights so thickly that they can block these lights completely. Think about if they're swarming around, say, stoplights or outdoor lights. They're going to completely block those stoplights, and you can't see if it's red or green. So for this reason, among others, they become a big hazard during their peak time. So there's actually been car accidents. There's actually been injuries caused because of these swarms. The adults are very short-lived, as their name states, so they live around 1 to 2 days total. Now, they have no way of replenishing their energy. They don't have mouth parts. They can't feed. So if they're unable to find a mate and lay their eggs in that few days time span, they're just going to die without sending on their genes. This is why we see them all emerge at the exact same time. Think about that for a minute. In order to make sure that there are enough mates out there, they have to make sure that they're not too early or too late. So the ones that take a little too long to emerge, or the ones that emerge too quickly, they're going to die off without sending their genes to the next generation. So they all coordinate with each other, all en masse. Now, this lack of mouth parts makes them great prey. They're the favorite food of fish. They lack mouth parts. They don't have a stinger. That means they are basically non-biting big old bags of calories. If you use mayflies as fish bait, you can catch all manner of fish. So if you've ever been fly fishing, this is what you're trying to do. You're basically tying a bunch of string and or thread and various other accoutrements around your hook to mimic what these mayflies look like. And then when you go fly fishing, you are trying to mimic the way that the mayflies will land on the water when they lay their eggs. So what they do is they come into the water, the females, and they will dip down really quickly with their abdomen, hit the top of the water, lay a couple of eggs, and then fly away again. So basically they're touching the water and flying off. So think about fly fishing. You're casting out that line, you're letting it touch the water, and you're pulling it back very quickly. You are enticing the fish to think that there's these mayflies out there, that they are feeding on these just bags of calories with no problems whatsoever. So these fish that feed on these mayflies, they love it because it's just no effort on their part, really. Nothing can fight back. So fly fishing is trying to mimic that. Awesome. Now, I'm going to show you a few videos of some of these mayflies out and about.
The mayfly belongs to one of the oldest orders of insects, the Ephemeroptera, with an evolutionary history dating back around 300 million years to the late Carboniferous period. There are around 50 species of Ephemeroptera in the UK and over 2,000 worldwide. Mayfly is a common generic term often used to describe any of these upwing flies. The mayfly as we know it gets its name from the fact that the adults originally emerged almost exclusively in the month of May. However, due to a discrepancy of 11 days caused by a change from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, the mayfly emergence now spans the months of May and June. There are 3 different species of mayfly in the UK, but by far the most common is the Ephemera danica, found on the Derbyshire Wye. The popular misconception is that the mayfly only lives for a couple of days, and while this may be true for the adult stages, this isn't the whole story. After hatching from the egg, the mayfly nymph is only just visible to the naked eye and will spend the next 2 years of its life burrowed into the riverbed, feeding on organic detritus and shedding its skin over 20 times, growing to over an inch in length before being ready to ascend to the surface. Many emerging mayfly imitations are tied clinkhammer style, with a body extending downward into the water, but in actual fact, the mayfly emerges flat on the surface of the water, with the nymphal shuck left trailing on the surface behind the newly emerged dun. The dun stage is unique among the insect world. No other order of insects has 2 different stages of winged adulthood. Upon emergence, duns are quite dull in colour, and the wings have a dull matte appearance due to a covering of fine hairs, thought to prevent the adhesion of water. The dun has no functioning mouthparts and underdeveloped sex organs. The only reason for existing is to escape. Those that do escape seek out the sanctuary of bankside vegetation, where within a matter of hours they will reach full sexual maturity and undergo a final emergence from the dun skin to become glossy, longer-tailed spinners. Like the dun before it, the spinner has no functioning mouthparts and relies solely on energy reserves stored up during the nymph stage to sustain it. With no need to feed and dwindling reserves of energy, time is of the essence for the spinners. With what seems like preternatural timing, the spinners all take to the wing around the same time in late afternoon, often forming clouds among the bankside trees. They all have one final urgent purpose: to breed. Mating takes place on the wing, but often preoccupied couples can be seen making unscheduled landings. For the males, the story ends here. But for the female, there is one more challenge. Carrying anything up to 8,000 eggs, she must return to the water. Female spinners can be seen dancing over the water, dipping down to release eggs at the water's surface. Those that linger too long often end up victims of a waiting trout. Sometimes the fish can be so preoccupied with these spinners, they will make spectacular leaps in anticipation of a protein-rich meal. A lucky few may fall prey to a more charitable predator on the banks of the Wye. The river keeper on his stretch of the river captures returning females and collects their eggs. As part of a repopulation program, the eggs are placed on protective glass sheets suspended in the river, ensuring much higher survival rates for the next generation of mayfly. With completely depleted energy reserves, the female lays spent and dying on the water. 2 years in the making for what seems like just a few moments of glory. The mayfly's life is complete.
Below the swollen waters, a swarm quietly brews. In the riverbeds, mayfly larvae have been living and waiting for 1 or 2 years to emerge. They have just 24 hours to live, and there's a lot to do. They come to the surface at night, pause for a moment, and make their first flight. The clouds of mayflies can be big enough to show up on Doppler radar. They spend up to 16 hours taking over any available riverside real estate. Then, between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, their skin splits in half. A new, slightly different creature is born, with just a few hours left to live. They swarm again, take over the skies, and mate. By the time the females lay their eggs, time is up.
All right, so that's it for Ephemeroptera. Let me know if you have any questions.